Try to say that 5 times fast. Dancing to some.
You're on like the Wii.
Yeah, I'm right.
Looking at all the other runners and trying to see where they're at, like how much that would slow you down.
Hello and welcome back to another podcast episode with me, Kyle Townsend. Today we have my wife with us, so she's going to be joining us for another episode here. In this one, we're going to be focusing a lot more on the relationship aspect of personal finance. If you have a significant other, right, somebody in your life that you are going along with, you're going to need to be able to discuss money and work together in order to achieve your financial goals. So we have 3 different topics that we're going to be talking about tonight, and the first one is going to be having conflicting priorities, financially speaking. The other one is different financial backgrounds. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is comparing your journey with others. So my wife obviously has a channel, and her channel will be linked in this video as a collaboration, as it has been in the past. Also, we collaborate on our monthly budgets as well, which the next one will be coming out very soon, this upcoming Wednesday. So you can go ahead and tune in and look at that as well after this video, of course. And so if you're interested in the happenings of our household as far as what the house looks like, the resets and all the vlogs and everything, then you'll definitely want to check out her channel because she does all of that stuff, whereas my channel is just the personal finance aspect of it. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and talk about the first topic, which is having conflicting priorities. So this one actually came up in one of my posts where I was asking about topics to discuss for the year 2026, and somebody had commented asking to talk about couples who have conflicting financial priorities and how to work through that. So in marriage, it is important to stay on the same page. If you're not on the same page, then that means you're pulling in opposite directions. And if you're pulling in opposite directions, then you're not going to get as far as you need to. We're Christians, so in the Bible, it talks about being equally yoked. And when it mentions yoke, it's talking about 2 oxen that have this wooden contraption, a yoke, on top of them, and the 2 oxen are pulling a wagon together. If the oxen are not equally yoked, that means they're not of the same strength and all those different types of things, those aspects that need to be there in order for them to pull together. If they're not equally yoked, then one oxen is shouldering more of the burden than the other, which can cause the wagon to turn in a certain direction, the other one. Or if they're not working as a team, one oxen's pulling this way and the other oxen's pulling a different direction, and the wagon doesn't get where it needs to go. So kind of think of it that way when it comes to financial priorities. Our financial priorities need to be on going the same direction. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that, how we can make sure to push in, or not really push, but pull in the same direction and get to common goals that we as a couple share. So to start off, we know there are lots of different financial strategies out there. We've talked about the fact that we use Dave Ramsey's strategy mostly. I won't say we do it to a T, but we do follow it fairly closely compared to the other strategies out there. I know the money guys, they use this FOO plan, this financial order operations plan. And then there are others out there with their own ideas and plans that people follow. So there are lots of different financial strategies out there. And so it's possible that you and your spouse could have different financial plans or visions that you have for your family. Maybe you are wanting to do Dave Ramsey's plan, but your spouse wants to do the money guy's plan or some other plan that's out there that I'm unaware of. And when you have that happen, you're going to have a lot of attention in your marriage. And also, you're not going to get anywhere when it comes to personal finance. So sometimes when we talk with each other, we can get a better understanding of where the other person is coming from. So this would be my first recommendation if you have a spouse that disagrees with you on what to do financially. I would talk with them and try to truly hear where they're coming from. So don't interrupt them. Let them spill it all out. Maybe even ask some questions for further clarification, but just let them talk. You might find that their perspective is actually more convincing than what you originally thought. And if that is the case, then you might find yourself back into agreement again, where the two of you you'll just join up with their plan, what they were planning on doing, and now you guys are back in unity again. Although it is possible that even after hearing them out, and you, of course, shared your thoughts on your plan and they don't agree with what you're thinking either, if that's the case and there's still a disagreement even after listening to both sides, well, then we need to come up with another plan, because you can't just continue on as you are. You can't just say, all right, well, you do your thing over here and I'll do my thing over here and we'll see what happens. You can't live a life of two roommates. We have a joint bank account, so all of our funds are together. We do everything together. So you kind of have to do the same thing. It's going to have to be some sort of conclusion to where you're both on the same page, no matter what. And I think that's where we need to talk about the next step.
And just to add to that, I think sometimes when you have disagreements and going into the conversation where we're trying to find a solution or a compromise, I think it's best to always go in with the thought of your spouse is your greatest ally. You guys probably have the same goals. You're just kind of going about it differently. And I think when you go in with that mindset of my spouse is my greatest ally, I think it opens our minds a lot more, because sometimes we'll go into conversations with our mind already made up and we're not willing to hear our spouse out. But I think if you go in with an open mind and knowing that they're not your enemy, they're your ally, I think we are able to come to a compromise much quicker, or a solution much, much quicker. And if you are two very strong-willed people, then I would say maybe add in a third party that could help you find a solution. So maybe that might be your parents or your pastor or someone in your life that you really trust and that really cares about you and wants to see you thrive. Include maybe that third party. And if you really just cannot find a compromise or a solution, because your marriage is worth finding those things and not staying in opposite directions. So I would just add that in terms of that, because we're one, but we're still like separate people. Like I have my own ideas, he's got his own ideas, and we mesh them together and we find compromises. And that honestly is our entire marriage, right? Just two different people building a life together and trying to see what works and what is the best route and finding the best solution or compromise.
And that's, where I was going to go to next is, compromising, and that marriage is a give and take. You can't always be the winner. If you're always winning, then your spouse is just going to stop sharing what they're thinking, because they're going to assume you don't care, because you always have to win and it always has to be your way. So why even bother? And if that's the way that you're always trying to every argument, try to win all the time, then you're going to find your relationship starts to fall apart. So marriage is a give and a take. So you have to, when you go into these kinds of conversations about money, if you know that you're not going to change their mind, then you have to find a compromise now. And when it gets to a compromise, there is no clear winner in a compromise. Both sides are getting something that they want, and both sides are getting something that maybe they aren't a fan of. So if you're, say, the saver and your spouse is the spender, then you may have to compromise in the sense that you're giving them a little bit more spending freedom that you would not prefer to give them, but you're going to give it to them because they're your spouse and you want to be on the same page, first of all, financially. But secondly, you want to walk out of that conversation with your spouse still in agreement with you, being an ally. The relationship is still good, right? So, but again, even though you're letting, in that hypothetical situation, right, your spouse is the spender, even though you're letting your spender spouse spend more, try to say that 5 times fast.
I was just thinking that.
A lot of S's. If you were to do that, you should be getting something in return, right, in the compromise. Maybe you're now saving more money for retirement than you were before getting into the conversation. Or maybe now you're budgeting more regularly than you were before, so now you're more aware of where your money is going, whereas before that, you guys weren't sure. Whatever the situation is, sometimes you have to do small wins first, right? You're not going to always change your spouse in one night. Sometimes it's going to take small wins. If your spouse hates budgeting, right? Maybe it's just going to try to get them to the table, right? And start budgeting. And then hopefully over time, they'll get used to it. And then you can start bringing in some other conversations like, hey, I noticed we aren't saving a lot. Maybe we need to cut back now on some of these things so we can start to save. Now that I finally got you to the table and you're regularly showing up to the meetings, now we can start to talk about other things. So sometimes it's also a gradual thing too. You're not going to get everything right away.
I think marriage requires a lot of patience sometimes. Patience and understanding. And I think obviously when people have conflicting priorities, especially when it comes to money, like that's a huge one. I think just offer a lot of patience for your spouse.
I guess the last analogy I got is that, people talk about how marriage is like a box and you put things into the box and what you put in is what you can then take out. So if you're not putting anything in, then you can't expect to get anything out of it. So you kind of have to think about marriage in a more selfless way than a selfish way. And if both sides can go into the conversation in a selfless way, kind of like what you were saying about the ally thing, that you're on the same team, they're actually your greatest ally, not your greatest enemy, and you go into it with those kinds of mentalities, same thing with the selflessness part of it, then you should be able to get out of the conversation a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
There should be a lot of good that comes out of it rather than a lot of friction and fighting and that sort of thing. So to wrap up this segment, just to kind of go back to what we said kind of at the beginning, which is that finances are going to work best when you guys are on the same team, when you're both those oxen pulling in the same direction, pulling the wagon in the same direction. You got the same plan, the same vision, and all of that. When all of that is happening and you're united, you're going to get further in life because now your spending habits, your saving habits, everything you're doing is pulling in that same direction. You'll find you'll be able to accomplish a whole lot more and a whole lot more big things too when the two of you are united and going in the same way. So with that said, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. The next one is about different financial backgrounds. So this is going to kind of dovetail with the previous segment that we just talked about, which is that we sometimes disagree on what plans to do, financially speaking. But before that, you have to understand that your spouse comes from a different background than you are. No two people are going to be exactly the same. You're not going to find a clone of yourself out there where it's exactly a perfect one-to-one match. They're going to be different than you in certain aspects, and you have to adjust to that and be okay with that. So we're going to explore some different financial backgrounds that people might come from. And then when you come together in a marriage, you have to work with that. The two of you have to work together. So the first one that I have here is spenders versus savers. So you could come from a family where it's mostly spending. You're thinking about all the things you can buy. Maybe you had lavish Christmases and big vacations, and money wasn't an object, right? It's all about spending, spending, spending. And maybe you're, buying all the drinks at the restaurants and those sorts of things. And it doesn't occur to you that that's a big deal.
Yeah, I was just thinking like we come from different financial backgrounds. I was a water-only family, and I don't care if you're 13, you're ordering off of the kids menu. And you come from a order whatever you want. Sure, you can have pop. You want refills? We'll pay the extra. He comes from one of those families. So like that is kind of an example where even to this day, I only order water. I mean, I don't drink pop anyways, but even if I did drink pop, I still would only order water because that saves me like $3. And you'll occasionally order a pop once in a while, but yeah. He knows how I feel about saving money, so...
Yeah, and then that's the thing. Yeah, savers, on the other hand, water only, maybe not going to restaurants as much, maybe not buying as many gifts, those sorts of things. It can really just be dependent upon the kind of background. And even in my own family, I am maybe a little bit more on the frugal side than the rest of my family members. So while I come from maybe a family that is more of a spender family, I am maybe the least of the spenders in the spender family.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that is a little bit of something that had to be an adjustment for me, is that when we go out to eat, we're drinking water. And I mean, it took a little bit of time, but I'm used to it now. It's not as big of a deal. But at the time, when I was a kid, that would have been the worst thing ever. That would have been unthinkable to order water. Why not just order a pop or order a juice or something and get more joy in life?
If I was ordering a pop at a restaurant, my parents weren't paying. Someone else was paying.
Yeah. So, yeah, it can take a little bit of adjusting, that's for sure. The next one that I had written down is working class versus middle class, or it could be, middle class versus upper class. It depends on the classes that people come from, but I think most people come from either working class or middle class families. And so I would say I came from maybe middle to upper middle, depends on the career, the years that my dad was working. And then you kind of come from more that working class.
Working class family. Yeah, my dad was always... for a good chunk of my life, he worked in a factory just on the floor. And my mom worked during my childhood as well. It's like when they had my little sister, that's when she became a stay-at-home mom. But I do remember my parents were both working parents. And my grandma would babysit me. But they both worked hard. They were both working kind of like factory jobs. They never got their college degree. They basically had a kid right out of high school. So they started off from the ground and they're thriving now. Absolutely thriving. But as a kid, I witnessed them working their butts off to make sure that we had a house, that we had clothes on our backs, food on our table. And I think that's why I am the way I am today. And I don't... Mm-hmm. I'm glad I got to witness that, because it's made me stronger and very resilient. And also I feel like it's also made me a saver as well, I think, kind of witnessing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my dad is the primary income earner from my family, and he's an accountant, and I think I've mentioned that before. And early on, when I was just born, he was going from a full-time grocery store worker job with part-time college to now getting his first job after college. So he had just recently was graduating. And so the early parts were lean, but I don't remember them because I was very young at the time. And as I got older, it was my mom stayed home for the most part and raised us, and my dad worked and brought home all the income and things. And for the most part, we did not struggle. And if we did, we didn't know anything about it. And there was no signs as far as that and anything like that. And I didn't have to work really to get anything, those sorts of things. It was just kind of, I guess you could say, given to me in a way. Like, for example, you worked a newspaper route and things like that. I was 12
years old, and yeah, I got my first newspaper route job. Made like pennies, but you know what? It gave me the freedom to buy a few things that I wanted to buy that I otherwise probably wouldn't have gotten. And I just want to add that even though my parents were working class and they weren't, I guess, necessarily as financially well off as your family, I did not know that we were working class. I always had everything I needed. And it's like I never went without in terms of the necessities. So I didn't know that my parents were struggling financially, or, you know, where they were financially, because they had that really, really well from us. It's only when I got older that I look back in life, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, this occurred. I wasn't aware of it, but looking back now that I'm older and I know things now I know, like, oh, that was a hard spot in our life. And as a kid, I did not know that they had any financial struggles, which I think is the best thing, especially like if for like lower income families, is when their kids are unaware. I think if you can keep that unawareness, that's a good thing.
It kind of reminds me of that one reel video where it's my dad in the 2008 financial recession. He's at the table holding his head and he looks over and you're dancing to some
You're on like the weed.
Yeah, whatever. Totally unaware of what's going on.
That was literally exactly, like, I resonated so much with that because I was that kid completely oblivious to the fact that my parents were just trying to figure out, like, how are we going to pay rent the next month, or, you know, what's a year going to look like for us.
And, you know, so the whole class thing and everything, it's, there's strengths to both.
Yeah.
You know, coming from different backgrounds, there are good things and there are, of course, some bad things or challenges that you have to overcome depending on the class that you come from, right? So if you come from a working class, usually you're probably a hard worker because things weren't given to you. Yeah. My dad's the same way. He came from a working class. My grandpa worked in a factory, so obviously they weren't given everything, and my dad had to work jobs as a kid to get the things that he wanted. So the work ethic can be really instilled at that kind of stage. Whereas, you know, middle class or other things that there are benefits that could be earned from that too. Nothing that's coming to mind right away, but I'm sure there are if you sit down and think about it, I'm sure. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next one. So another difference that could be between you and your spouse could be financial literacy. You could be somebody who comes from a family that talks a lot about money and teaches how to handle money well. And you might marry somebody whose family money was a topic we don't discuss. We don't want to mention anything about it. We don't want to, because it'll make us look bad or whatever kind of taboo things that are with money. And so then the financial literacy piece is completely absent from that family and that person. So it's possible that, you know, you could have a difference in financial literacy too. And then the last thing that we have here for different financial backgrounds is dreamers versus doers. Some people are visionaries. They're always looking 5 years, 10 years ahead and what they can build and the projects and all the things that they would love to see happen in their life. And then you have the person that may not have necessarily a vision, but they know how to do work. They know how to put things together. They know how to put the vision into action. And sometimes, you know, you and your spouse can have two different backgrounds when it comes to that. Your spouse may be the dreamer and you may be the doer, which may irritate you because they're coming up with all the dreams and you're the one that's having to put all the dreams into action. But if you don't have the dreamer, then there's no vision to create in the first place. So those are good things too. And this kind of leads to the last thing for this particular segment, is that you and your spouse are going to come from different backgrounds no matter what. And like I said earlier, there is no perfect one-to-one person out there that you're going to marry that's basically a clone of you. So, as you had mentioned, John Deloney had mentioned in one of his videos that when you and your spouse come together, you have to make something new.
Yeah.
So no matter who you marry or who you're with and the background that they bring with them, no matter what, you have to make something brand new as a couple, as a new family. You are a new family unit. You're not your previous family's unit. You're your own. And so you have to build something brand new, a new financial plan, a new budget, a new vision, whatever it is that you're going to create, but it has to be created with your spouse. Mm-hmm. All right, moving to the last topic for tonight, and that is comparing ourselves with others. So as a couple, it can be tempting to compare yourself with other people around you and see how you stack up, whether you are being successful or maybe not as successful as other people. Generally speaking, if you feel like you're not as successful as the people around you when you're comparing. Comparison is often that thief of joy and that sort of thing. Comparing can be good sometimes. It just depends on how you're doing it. Comparison can help you discover new ideas or new ways of doing things that you had not thought of before. And you can then co-op, right? Take those ideas and bring them into your own family unit and then better your family unit from there. And we have done that with some of the comments that you guys sometimes give us on these videos, where you guys bring different ideas that we hadn't even thought of, and then we incorporate them into our plan, and it ends up benefiting us. But for the most part, though, a lot of times when we compare ourselves to others, we are just finding ourselves lacking. We find ourselves being jealous, keeping up with the Joneses. And that will that'll cause us to spend more and more and more money.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest struggles for Americans is comparison, because you see, like, it's all thrown at us. It's right there in our phone. All the things that you could have. I mean, people usually go into debt for it, but you could look cool if you had this, or you could make bank if you did this, and it's just really a money trap from TikTok. But like, I think you need to look at all of that and tune it out. I think that's just like the best thing you can do is focus on your family and not focus on what so-and-so is doing or where so-and-so is at in life. Like, they're the same age as me and they're already doing this. Tune that all out. Like, the moment you tune that out and you just focus on your family and where you are currently at, you are going to feel this weight lifted off your chest, and you can finally breathe. Like, you can just breathe again. And I think that's something that I know I really try to focus on, is not comparing. And I don't know, I feel like I'm thriving a lot more, not having to compare myself to others, and just really focusing on you, focusing on the kids, focusing on the house that we have, focusing on the cars that we have. And when you just truly rest and enjoy those things and not expect more and more and more, you I don't know, it's really hard to put into words, but it just feels like a lot of freedom that I think people don't realize that they're lacking, because it's a constant comparison. And I mean, that's social media, right? They're there to influence you, but I think you should use social media to inspire you and not influence you. And that's something I know on my own personal channel, that's something I really want to do. But I know on like my own personal YouTube, that's something that I am really passionate about, is not influencing you, but inspiring. So giving good ideas. Like, you guys inspire us all the time in the comments.
If you're watching us, hopefully, yes, we can be more of an inspiration, but don't use us as a measuring stick or a comparison tool that ends up beating you over the head and feeling like you're not getting anywhere because you're not measuring up to what we're at. That should not be the case. So hopefully we're not that thing to you as well. And if we are, then hopefully you can start to let go of that and understand that you have your own family and your own financial situations and that sort of thing. And that you don't need to compare to us. Not that we are anything glamorous, that's for sure. I mean, you guys have seen the videos of what our house is and stuff like that. It's nothing extravagant, and we kind of prefer it that way anyway.
Yeah, it's not, it's not extravagant, but we love it. We love where we're at. We love our small home. We love our used cars because there's no car payment. We love each other. We love our kids, and we love what we have. And I think you just need to, if you're struggling with comparison, like I said before, just tune out those things and focus on what you already have and learn to love it, or have a mind shift to love it. And just, I think you should love what you have. Not that you can't ever get more, but if you're not able to, that's okay. Just love and rest where you're currently at, while working towards the things that you do want in a more slower, more wise way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, not trying to go into massive debt to try to impress people. Or, as Dave Ramsey says, going to massive debt to impress people who don't even care, or people you don't even like, and that sort of thing. So, trying not to overextend yourself for things that, as I've mentioned in my own channel, stuff doesn't really bring you happiness. It's things that are spent with others, right? Yeah. Spending time with others and going on vacations or experiences with others. Those are the things that bring happiness. It's not the stuff that you buy with money. So, and that kind of segues into kind of wrapping up the video here, the segment, and that is that you should just run your own race. Other people that you see on social media, YouTube, wherever you're seeing them, maybe in your own life, they are in a different stage, potentially, in a different place, and they're running their race. And so you need to focus on the race that you're running, the path that you're at. They could be 10 to 15 years ahead because maybe they're 10 to 15 years older than you. And they've had more time to build up their finances and that sort of thing. So you can't always compare. And there are many other variables besides just working years. There are many other variables that make you different from the people that you're comparing yourself to. Your spouse is different than their spouse, or both people, I guess you could say. Your job is different than their job. Your kids are different than their kids. The place that you live is different than the place that they live. And all those factors can come into play for where they are at compared to where you're at. Like, we have a house, but we also live in the Midwest. So it's a little bit more attainable for us. Whereas if you're living somewhere else where the cost of living is insane, then a house probably isn't in the cards, at least depending on your age. If you happen to be the same age as us, then you would probably have to wait a little bit longer. So location, that's another thing that can have an effect. So run your own race. Understand that the variables, the things in your life are very different from the things in other people's lives, and that's okay.
Yeah, I guess I was actually thinking I didn't even know that was your last point. So like all the points I'm like just now hearing.
Yeah.
So when you were saying run your own race, I ran track in 8th grade. So my running knowledge is like next to nothing. But I was thinking that if you are in a race and you have this finish line, could you imagine like looking at all the other runners and trying to see where they're at, like how much that would slow you down? When if you would just focus on the finish line, you're going to get there much quicker. Like that kind of made me think of that. So like even when it comes to your financial state or your family, like whatever it may be, when you look at all the distractions or the comparison to other people and other families, it's just going to slow you down, and you're not going to get to where you want to go more efficiently or quickly. So I think, just like we said, just focus on your family, focus on whatever financial goals you've set with your spouse, and run that race. Run your own race. Don't worry about the other people running their race as well. I mean, cheer them on, but don't compare yourself to them and think that they're better or whatever it may be. So that made me think of that, of how looking at other people would just really just slow you down.
Yeah, and that's true. That I ran track as well, but the coaches always talk about how if you want to run faster, you need to look forward. You can't be looking to the left and the right, because that actually slows you down. So yeah, that really works out, matches up. Great analogy. So I think that's where we're going to end this video. If you have any thoughts, comments about what we have talked about today, go ahead and leave those down below, and we'll certainly take a look at those at some point. Leave a like if you haven't yet, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, either channel, go ahead and do that as well. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.